And the first pre-E3, but also E3 press conference has concluded. It is over. Bethesda has shown the games that they were ready to show for their first E3 press conference. They've never done one before. This was their first one. I gotta say, well, I watched Game of Thrones for half of it, but fortunately, the pre-press conference coverage from Adam Sessler and Morgan Webb covered most of Game of Thrones, and then I jumped into watching the Bethesda press conference when they were in the middle of unveiling their sort of video for Doom 4, and I gotta say, I think Bethesda knocked it out of the park. I think they had a fantastic showing of an interesting set of games, a lot of really absurdly violent games, so if you were not looking for first-person violence, then, well, you came to the wrong press conference. And, but it is interesting because the one game that offers non-violent means of resolving things, Dishonored 2, is the game they didn't really show a whole lot for and instead just kind of said, it's happening. So anyway, let's kind of rewind from there because there's a lot to cover. There's a lot of very interesting things that happened at this press conference, and I want to try and hit as many of them as possible. I wrote down a bunch of notes as I was tuning in, but like I said, let's cheers to the beginning of E3, the beginning of press conference, the beginning of lots of fun, emotional reactions. So, we begin with Doom 4. Now, I didn't see the setup. In fact, when I turned on the press conference, I had to tweet out, did they show Fallout already? Am I getting to the tail end of this and Doom's at the end? It's the closer. And instead, people said that it had just begun. I was seeing Doom halfway through. And the little I could kind of decipher from what they did show, and I saw bits of a trailer as part of a post-press conference event that they're doing, continuing with Adam Sessler and Morgan Webb. They're going for something really, really fast. The closest thing that I could compare Doom 4 to was Bulletstorm, in that if Doom 1 and 2 were fast games that just happened to be scary because the technology was so advanced in a way that it was kind of creepy and unsettling, but they were really just fast, violent action games. And Doom 3 tried to slow things down and become, in some ways, a horror game. It was still a fast action game, but they were going for jump scares. They were going for monster closets. I mean, if there was a game that defined monster closets, it was Doom 3, in which enemies were literally just spawning out of monster closets. It was absurd. But I really enjoyed Doom 3 when it came out. It was a game that I found tremendously scary. I loved playing it at night with headphones. It really unnerved me. And, the idea of whether it lived up to Doom 1 and 2 is kind of an absurd question because, at least for me, like Doom as a series falls into sort of like Jurassic Park's Ghostbusters territory where I was so young that I can't really separate how I felt about those games when I was young and what they actually are. And I think that's something about nostalgia that's kind of difficult to unhook from the reality. And you don't have to unhook it from reality because I think your nostalgia is inherently tied to how you feel about that stuff. And although there may be a certain reality to it, that reality is intertwined with the context in which you experience those things. So that's a long way of saying that I'm not surprised they're going for something different. And that although Doom 4 seems like a big separation from Doom 3, it actually doesn't seem like a huge separation from Doom 1 and 2. In a lot of ways, it feels like Doom 1 and 2 brought into modernity, in which it's a game that's absurdly violent. It's a game in which things are happening very fast. I thought it was a subtle and nice touch that when you switch weapons, you're actually given this brief moment, this brief window in which to actually slow the action down, catch your breath, and kind of figure out what's happening around you. Now, do I expect that the average map of Doom 4 will play out as fast as what was happening in that demo? Probably not. It's a controlled demo that was meant to convey what they want the pace of Doom 4 to be. And it'll be a little while yet, given that that game is coming out in spring 2016, that's potentially a full year from now. Like, spring can kind of stretch itself in a way that is not March or April or even May. So it's possible that Doom is a ways off. But nonetheless, I think what they were aiming for was conveyed very well in the demo, in so much as it's a game that's going to be extremely fast, The deaths and weapons and enemies and environments are going to be to the nth degree, and it's the complete opposite of the Elite version of Doom 4 that we've seen kind of floating around, which was a Call of Duty sort of grounded, gritty take on what Doom could be. And they, at some point, I want to say smartly, I don't know how that version of Doom would have turned out, but I want to say, based on what I saw, I'm interested and excited by what they're trying to put together. It's interesting and absurd. And I liked Bulletstorm quite a bit. There were plenty of problems with Bulletstorm, but I really liked the kind of fun, action-y gameplay. Like, Bulletstorm reminded me in a lot of ways of a first-person Mega Man. Like, I was sliding and shooting things, and I was dynamic, and it flowed. One of the things that I really appreciate about games, especially first-person games, are games that feel like you can establish a flow as you move around the environment. Dishonored is great at that. And it seems like Doom 4 might be aiming for something like that, in which it maybe is taking some cues from Dishonored, in which to create a world where you're jumping around and you think you can do that. Well, you can do it. And so, curious to see more of that. You know, it's very early days in us seeing Doom 4. Interestingly enough, in some ways it feels like they showed more of Doom 4 than of Fallout 4, even though Fallout 4 is the game that's coming out later this year. But interested to see more of Doom 4. Looks exciting. I'm curious what Doom fans think of it. Please let me know what you think in the comment section. Super interesting, but there's more to cover. I'm not going to cover the Elder Scrolls Online. I'm not going to cover Elder Scrolls Legends. Those games just don't interest me. But the game I will cover, it's where I started taking notes. Dishonored 2. So Dishonored 2 was a game. On Saturday morning, I tweeted out, what magic spells do I have to cast to get Dishonored 2 announced at E3? A couple of hours later, Dishonored 2 got leaked through a Twitch broadcast on Bethesda's own channel that's hard to know. Did they do it on purpose? I don't know. Does it matter? Not really, because Dishonored 2 was announced, which makes me really excited. They didn't show a whole lot. They showed a CG trailer that conveyed potentially some of the mechanics and some of the different gameplay options you'll have. Sounds like you're going to be playing as Emily. It sounds like you're going to be playing as a female character. Generally speaking, that was a sort of a bullet point that Bethesda was hitting over and over during their press conference. We'll get a little bit to that more so in Fallout 4. But I'm just glad Dishonored 2 is announced. They didn't show a whole lot about it. I'm not even sure if we caught a release date on that. I might have missed it. I was taking notes and tweeting and keeping up with people's tweets. But I'm glad that Dishonored exists because although Dishonored 2 did not have a particularly good story, I thought it had a great world. I loved everything about what they were trying to convey except for the actual story they were trying to tell. But Dishonored was a game that I really, really enjoyed playing. When I played Deus Ex, which, like I've said multiple times, like depending on the day that you talk to me, either Deus Ex or Mega Man 2 is my favorite game of all time. And I've been waiting ages for sort of a spiritual successor to that in some way. And I think Human Revolution was that in some ways, but I think Dishonored was the game that hit more of the bullet points I was looking for. And one of the things that I liked about Dishonored, I was talking before about Doom, in which a sense of motion, a sense of movement. And Dishonored nailed that. Like the blink mechanic, I think, encompasses everything that I really liked about all of the stuff they were trying to accomplish with Dishonored, which is to say, a lot of times when you're trying to play stealthily, you see, there's where I want to go. God, okay, it's such a pain ass to get there. Am I going to really sit and watch these AI routines over and over and over again? And Dishonored says, all right, here in our mythology, we can say you have the ability to teleport. This is a short teleport, but it allows you to get where you want to go. It allows you to escape situations. It allows you to, more importantly, when you play these types of games, often you run into a problem where you are running between the action and the stealth, or it's one or the other. And in Dishonored, you could do both, in which you could try and play stealthily, and then if you find yourself in combat, that's okay. Blink and the other options available to you allowed you to navigate either to continue being sort of on the front and fighting and participating in the action, or pulling back, going back to stealth. And it gave you options in a way that a lot of other games didn't. And as I tweeted out, I continue to be very sad that I was not able to convince Giant Bomb to put it on their top 10 list. How did I not even get it in the top 10? I put Zombie U on that list and didn't let Dishonored make it onto that list. Now, I liked Zombie U a lot, but Zombie U over Dishonored, I don't know. I feel like that's one of those times when the horror part of me clouding my judgment. Goddamn. Anyway, Dishonored 2 is coming. Very excited that it wasn't just a rumor, that it is happening, and curious to see what Arcane is up to with Dishonored 2, and also the other project that they are supposedly working on, the sort of reboot of Prey, which was not at the press conference, but, maybe we'll hear about next year, because it seems like Bethesda has quite a lineup going for themselves, at least in the next 12 to 18 months. And then the big boy, the end of the press conference, Fallout 4, which I also tweeted about this, and one of the things I'm trying to do this E3 is kind of a no-snark E3. Not to say that I won't tweet about things or talk about things that I dislike, but I really want to focus on not being sarcastic and not being snarky. If I have something to say that I disagree with, I want to convey that. If there's something I'm excited about, I want to convey that. But I feel like snark is very easy. Snark is often people like myself trying to be funny when they're not funny. And the reason I say that is because Fallout 3 is what made me fall in love with open world games. And watching Fallout 4, I really did have my hands, or my head in my hands, just watching this demo. Just so excited to see what they had to show. Hoping against hope that they were going to announce that it was going to come out this year. And then thinking about the games that I'm going to have to think about, like putting in the top 10 list, Bloodborne and Witcher 3 and Fallout 4. And that's like not even to touch any of the indie games that I've played. Just so much going on. And I wrote down a couple of excerpts from the demo that I just kind of want to hit on really quickly. I thought it was incredibly important and a small detail, but an important detail, that Bethesda, when they showed off their character creator, not only did they bring the point home that you can be a man or a woman, but they cycled through all sorts of different skin colors to show that, Fallout 4 is the kind of game where, yes, they have a story they want to tell, but the character you get to play, the player you're going to be, is someone that is whoever you want to be, whether that represents yourself, whether that represents something else you'd like to try and be, whether you're role-playing or whether you're being yourself. They are clearly acknowledging the whole spectrum. And a lot of these games include that whole spectrum, but not a lot of games acknowledge that when they do the press conference to point out, like, you can be a guy, you can be a girl, you can be a man, you can be a woman, you can be white, you can be black, you can be somewhere in between. They are allowing you a spectrum of characters that you just don't normally see, and I liked that they acknowledged that in the press conference, because, it's one of those things that I think for the folks that get sort of uptight about these kinds of conversations, is it really the end of the world if they didn't do that? Absolutely not. Is it a cool, important moment that they did recognize those? Absolutely. And so I'm glad they did. Couple other things that I wrote down, player character is voiced. We'd been kind of speculating about that. I did like they made the acknowledgement that, yes, the player character is going to be voiced, but you have options on how that's conveyed, right? So you can be in first person. You can be in third person. You can walk away from the conversation. And Todd Howard, the creative director of Bethesda, also mentioned that you can shoot anyone in the face. Now, I wonder how far they're going to bring that. It might have just been an offhanded comment in order to get a laugh out of the audience at E3. But is it also possible that they're going to include more dynamic player choice in the things that are happening in that world? We've seen people who have done experiments with Fallout 3 and New Vegas where they kill everyone in the world. But the game doesn't necessarily bend that way or acknowledge that. I wonder if there are ways in Fallout 4 where they're going to sort of allow you to play with that world in a different way. My guess is it's more of just a cheap laugh, and people will continue to do the weird stuff where they bend the game in different ways. And if whether it acknowledges it or not, neither here nor there. So excited. I'd speculated about this when the game was announced. The dog can pick shit up for you. Hallelujah. The idea that I can send my dog around to grab loot for me. The one thing it doesn't do, or at least they didn't demonstrate, was that if it does it automatically. So you can kind of, they showed that the dog you adopt or find can kind of contextually go and interact with things, grab things. But I'd love it was just like a double tap an analog stick and just go pick up the loot and bring it all to me. But if at the very least it is like point at a body, he goes over, collects it while you're looking at other bodies, that is a significant step forward. And I like the fact that you're going to have a companion that interacts with the world around you. They showed the dog running around with you all the time. They still have not talked about what happens with that dog, even if it can die, and what happens if it dies. I assume someone at E3 is going to ask that question, and I'm curious what the answer is going to be. They also confirmed that VATS is back, but the one thing that I thought was most telling was they spent most of the time with shooting out of VATS, and it makes me wonder if they've spent a significant portion of the time in between Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 really refining that combat engine and making shooting combat something viable if you don't want to go in VATS, or if VATS is something that you go into when you're doing very finely tuned shots that you want to do something very specific, and that you can actually spend most of your time outside of VATS. Hard to say because a lot of the gameplay is happening out of context, and they're mostly just confirming various features. I assume we're going to see a lot more of that in the months to come, but VATS is back. It seemed a little more, I guess dynamic is a word, but without watching a full gameplay demo that explains all of what's happening there, which I think they're going to do a little bit more in depth throughout E3. Hard to say, but the problem with the VATS and Fallout 3 was that it just kind of became a min-max trying to shoot dudes in the head. And once you had that kind of taken care of, there wasn't a whole lot of reason to mess with anything else. I wrote down here, the game looks amazing. It's really colorful. I think it looks even better than in the trailer. Not saying that the trailer was holding back or a worse version of the game, but just seems so colorful and vibrant, and there's a whole world to explore. That's I keep coming back to this word dynamic, but I think that's just because I've had a couple of drinks and it's the end of the night. But I do like the fact that it was really colorful. It doesn't seem bland and bleak in the same way that Fallout 3 was. And not to say that Fallout 4 isn't going to be bleak. I think it's still going to be a place where there's lots of death and horrible things, but maybe there is a little bit of hope, or at least if there's not hope, it's a world that has colors other than green and brown. I think the Pip-Boy looks a little bit cooler. I'm sure it'll get boring, just as any interface gets boring. Curious how they're going to handle some of that stuff. I've been getting frustrated in Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, in which open worlds are really exciting, but you spend a lot of time in menus and interfaces in these games, and if they don't get that stuff right, man, is it frustrating. So there's a lot more crafting happening. It's in Fallout 4, so I really hope they make that streamlined and interesting and easy to use. And if you're trying to navigate through things, it's easy to get to the other menus. It all seems like small stuff, and you don't notice it in the first couple of hours, but when you get 30, 40, 50, 60 hours into these games that we spend potentially over 100 hours in for a lot of us, that stuff adds up. And so I hope they're taking that stuff into account. Again, didn't see a lot of those smaller details. It's the kind of things we're not going to see until later gameplay demos, whether it happens here or later in the year. But, as we get towards the end, it's not going to be that long until we know more. They showed the app. I did like that Todd Howard was really straightforward about how he felt about in-app purchases and energy systems. It was basically no bullshit. Like he said, it's none of that stuff, and it's free. We just wanted to give you a fun game to play, and there's stuff to buy, but the stuff is just loot, and it's not any of the sort of BS that you're used to with all these other types of games. So that's pretty cool. I have the game downloading on my phone now. I'm looking forward to checking it out tomorrow. But between me recording this, editing this, recording another video, editing that, I'm not going to have time to play Fallout Shelter tonight, but please let me know what you think. I'm excited to see if it's actually a good game. They dedicated so much time to it that I'm hopeful that it's actually pretty good. And I did like that Todd Howard gave a pretty funny dig at second screen experiences, saying that even if this is a gimmick, it's a pretty good gimmick. Because you know what? Not enough companies have the pride to say it is just a gimmick. If you don't like it, that's fine. And I like the fact that they actually kind of called a spade a spade. And the last thing, November 10th, 2015. I had been speculating, I had been predicting they were going to bring it out this year, but then we actually found out that Fallout 4 is coming out this year in November. It's hard to believe that's actually happening, given the scope of that game, but it makes me tremendously excited to know that at some point later this year, I'll be trying to play as much Fallout 4 as possible, and I'm sure all of you will be too. There's so many other things I could probably talk about. There's so many little details I could pluck out, but I've got to bring this to a close. And so please let me know what you noticed about Doom, Dishonored, or the other games that we didn't touch on, Elder Scrolls Online, Elder Scrolls Legends. Maybe there's something interesting about that you want to talk about that I didn't get a chance to touch on. So please let me know in the comments. The rest of my E3 coverage is kind of going to be like this. My sort of like baseline idea is that I'm going to record responses to all of the press conferences in addition to the coverage I'm doing at Kotaku.com. So you can look forward to this in video and audio form here on YouTube at youtube.com/Patrick Klepek. Please let me know your thoughts on E3, Bethesda, Dishonored, Doom 4, Fallout 4. There's a lot more to go. So thanks for tuning in, and I will talk to you guys later.